believe they're French. I believe Rumeur means rumor. I think it does. And I honestly don't really know anything about the brand Lanvin, but I believe that they are a more like designer brand. They're definitely not like a niche brand. I think they've been around for a while. I think they definitely have had some popular perfumes, maybe particularly in like the 80s, 90s. I'm not sure. I feel like you don't really hear about them as much recently, like the way that you hear about, like, I don't know, Marc Jacobs, or what's another designer brand, like Valentino or something. But anyway, this is the only Lanvin fragrance that I own, and the reason that I wound up acquiring this fragrance is that I sometimes I'll go ahead and like purchase samples, fragrance samples off of Mercari that are just like a big mix of random samples, and I did that, and I had a sample of Rumeur, and the funny thing is the sample had turned like it was old, and I could tell that the sample was old and off, but even so, there was something about the fragrance that I just was kind of addicted to smelling. Like, I kept smelling it, and even though I was like, ooh, that's off, there was something in it that I really liked. So I go ahead and I chanced getting a bottle because it was only like $25 to buy a bottle new. So I chanced getting a bottle, and I do really, really like this fragrance, oddly enough. So I'll go ahead and spray it in a moment. I really wasn't sure how to dress for this one. I would say it has predominantly like white florals and musk, so I just went for like a more kind of light, muted tone, and then I did some beaded white earrings. I mean, as you can see, it has a little bit more of like a faded, like a rustic cap, but I don't know. I don't really know like what is behind the theme, like the name and everything. Rumor. When I think of rumor, I think of something maybe almost like kind of naughty, or like something mysterious. I don't know. This fragrance doesn't necessarily give that vibe to me. And the smell doesn't like fully match the look of the bottle necessarily. I don't know. But anyway, interesting little cap. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and spray this fragrance, and then I'll tell you what I am smelling. So we have a white, looks like a white iris. So that makes sense for today because this is, I would say, like a predominantly white floral type of smell. Okay, so I'm gonna give it a little spray, and I'm gonna just give it a moment to dry down. So this fragrance is from, let's see, 2006. You know, that's funny. I thought it was earlier. It honestly smells like it could have been from like 1996 or like early 2000s, but it's from 2006, and to me, it definitely has a bit of a vintage, just like a vintage flair to it. So I don't necessarily know that it would appeal to the average female perfume buyer these days, but I really like it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and smell it. So yeah, it's floral. It's just like a clean floral musk. I don't really know what else to say. If I didn't know, I know a couple of the notes, but if I didn't know what the notes are, I would be like, it's like a floral musk. Maybe there's like a fruit in there, like maybe like a citrus or a very like watery fruit. But it's pretty simple. There's probably like something giving it a slight, almost earthy base, like something slightly ambery or maybe almost like mossy. But it's mostly just like a very fresh, musky, floral smell. So very feminine for sure. And if you're not into florals, you're probably not going to be into this. But it doesn't smell like a fresh cut floral bouquet either, you know what I'm saying? It definitely smells like a perfume, and it almost, to me, like I said, smells a little bit like a slightly vintage perfume. So I really like it. I think it's really nice. I'll go ahead and read you the main accords that we have listed on Fragrantica.com. Okay, so we have white floral, floral, musky, rose, citrus, fresh, powdery, and patchouli. That makes sense. I feel like there was something slightly almost like earthy, something grounding it in the base. So I guess there must be a patchouli note. And you know, I love patchouli. I've said that in a lot of videos. I don't necessarily love like a super dominant patchouli note, but like I love it like as part of a formulation. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the notes on this fragrance. Okay, so we have one top note listed, and it is magnolia. Magnolia. Now, magnolia to me, like, I'm not super familiar with it, but from what I have gathered from trying to smell it, and I've actually smelled it like on trees in my local area, you know, we actually technically have like a tiny magnolia in our yard. We literally figured that out this spring a couple months ago. So anyway, I have found magnolia to smell fresh, perhaps a bit dewy, and sometimes it almost has a bit of like a beachy vibe. Like it can make, if it's very strong magnolia, it can almost smell like a beach breeze, kind of white floral. But yeah, definitely like a fresh, almost aquatic vibe. So that makes sense. I feel like I'm getting like a fresh, dewy, white floral kind of vibe from this. So I definitely feel like I'm getting some magnolia. Okay, for our middle notes, we have 5 middle notes. And they are lily of the valley, rose, jasmine, orange blossom, and plum. Honestly, I did not know there was plum in here. I thought it would have been like bergamot or something like that. So a bunch of florals, and then plum. Rose, that is our non-white floral that we have. And then we have lily of the valley, jasmine, orange blossom. So I don't know, I feel like it's just like a smattering of florals. The magnolia makes sense, the rose makes sense, the lily of the valley makes sense because that's like a very clean, like, yeah, just a clean, again, almost slightly aquatic smell. I don't really feel like I'm getting an obvious orange blossom, but maybe that gives it a bit of like that citrus facet that I was saying. So I don't know, I'm just gonna say I'm getting a bunch of florals. Plum, I don't really know. I don't know that I'm getting plum in an obvious way, but perhaps it kind of rounds it out and gives it some depth, some like nondescript depth that I would have never been able to tell you is plum. I don't know. Okay, and then for our base notes, we have notes of musk, patchouli, and amber, and those make sense to me. I'm definitely getting musk. I would say I'm getting some patchouli. It's just like a kind of slight earthy, warm, slight aromatic vibe. Amber makes sense, but it's not at all an ambery fragrance. There's just maybe like a touch of that. So I really like those base notes. I feel like if those base notes were not here, I would not like the fragrance as much. They just add like a slight amount of like depth to the like overall very fresh floralness. So what I get from this mostly, I would say, is like white florals, rose, and then musk and patchouli. If I look at the votes on Fragrantica, other users say they mostly get magnolia, musk, lily of the valley, rose, jasmine, patchouli, etc. really do not seem to be smelling the plum. I mean, it's not obvious, so whatever the plum is doing is apparently very subtle and just a background note. Yeah, so it's an interesting fragrance. Like, I just feel like it's one that's a little hard to, like, imagine until you smell it. I personally have not ever smelled anything quite like it, even though it's not necessarily that remarkable. But I really like it. I really do. And it has a bit of, like, a vintage vibe, like something that your mom might smell like, kind of thing. I don't own any other Lanvin fragrances, so I don't have any others to show you at this point in the video. So let's just go ahead and go over some other stats for this fragrance. It was, like I said, launched in 2006, and it has a rating of 3.77 out of 5 with just a bit over 2,000 votes on Fragrantica. So that's not the best rating. It's just, I would say, slightly below kind of like an average decent rating. So I don't think this is like, yeah, this makes sense. Like, I don't think this is one that the average person would smell and be like, oh my god, I love it. I definitely think it's not going to appeal to everybody, but I really like it. I did see that there is a flanker to this fragrance. It is called Lanvin Rumeur 2 Rose. So I assume it's a much more rosy fragrance. Let's see what it has. It has a bunch of citruses, pear, a bunch of white florals, rose. The base is the same, musk, patchouli, and amber. And looking at the votes, people say they get mostly lemon, rose, the other citruses. So it sounds like a very citrusy, like a very fresh rose. Yeah, I haven't smelled it though. But looking at some other reviews, or looking at some other info on Fragrantica, people are saying that the longevity is on the longer lasting side. And honestly, I have not worn this for a bit, so I totally don't remember. But I don't remember it being weak, I'll tell you that. So it makes sense that it would last a bit longer because it's like a musky floral. They're also saying that the sillage is a bit more strong, which I do agree, and that the gender is definitely more feminine. I agree. People are comparing it to Narciso Rodriguez for her. The black bottle, the black rectangular Narciso Rodriguez for her. They're also comparing it to Sarah Jessica Parker's Lovely, which those all smell the same. Like, those two smell the same. And I have smelled those, and I could see that comparison. It definitely has that kind of vibe, but I don't know. This one leans a little bit different in a certain way. Those ones are, I would say, a bit more musky. This one's a bit more heady, floral, I would say. Because honestly, you know what? I think that I do have Sarah Jessica Parker's Lovely. Let me go ahead and grab that. Okay, this is Sarah Jessica Parker's Lovely. And it does smell pretty similar. I can't even tell you what is like different, but it is. It is different. This one is more like clean white floral. It's just more floral. It's more floral. It's more high pitched. The Sarah Jessica Parker is more grounded. It's a little just more like musky, aromatic. So yeah, but I definitely see the comparison. Okay, and then let's finish up by reading a few reviews. Okay, somebody says, I blind bought this fragrance, and the moment I smelled it, I was instantly reminded of Maison Francis Kurkdjian's Amoureuse. I think they mean the Amoureuse Femme. fragrance, as normally I go for much heavier fragrances, yet beneath the sparkling opening it still carries a hidden warmth and creaminess, which I love. I agree, it does have almost like a bit of a sparkling vibe, but as well as like a bit of creaminess and warmth underneath. So I agree with that review. Okay, somebody else says, I love how strong it is. It initially has a heady floral vibe that develops into a crisp, grassy scent similar to what one would get upon mashing flower petals with a mortar and pestle. Then, upon keeping it on for longer, it settles as pretty straightforward, lightly earthy musk. It has a very good longevity and it's effortlessly elegant and vibrant. I can really see myself stepping into the dewy grass of a field, watching the clouds undulate and collide, anticipating the chaotic and serendipitous surprises of spring weather. Okay, so yeah, I really agree with what they said about like mashing flower petals with a mortar and pestle. It definitely has that vibe to me. Like, I don't know if you've ever like crumpled up rose petals in your hand and then you like sit them for a few hours and those develop a slightly like fermenty alcoholic vibe. I know that sounds crazy, but this smells like just slightly aged like flower petals and like a bit earthy, like slightly earthy musky. I don't know. It really does smell like what I imagine a more vintage, like a vintage like perfume oil, like a vintage like an essential oil made 100 years ago kind of vibe, if that makes sense.